I'm going to start off this review with the edge retention test of Alliance Design's S35 VN with their factory edge, which is a very nice one indeed. Just getting any of my use off of it now. I haven't stuck this in the dirt or anything like that to really reduce the edge. I've mainly just been cutting a bit of cardboard and fruit. So we're just going to get a rough benchmark of if the S35 VN is treated well enough to hold to, you know, what should be about 150 to 250-ish cuts. You know, nothing too crazy either way is what I'd be expecting. So let's get into that at the start of this review, and then we'll do all the talking. Cool, so just keeping in mind, this wasn't my edge, it was just their factory edge, just kind of rehoned. It's cut 180 times before it no longer bit into a nice clean sheet of paper like that. Instead it started to tear and rip away at it like that. So not completely comparable, but just an example of, yeah, it's probably pretty okay S35 VN treatment on this blade. Now, on with the review. Now, Ray Laconico is one of my preferred knife designers. I don't buy custom knives or anything like that, but I've always had a fancy for Ray's work ever since one of the first kind of premium-ish knives, as it was back then, was a Kaiser Gemini that I purchased. And it was a fabulous little knife, really nice round, smooth handle, quite a small knife. I ended up moving it on because there was slightly larger versions of that same knife that were on the horizon that I bought and enjoyed and eventually sold as well, because that's how shallow we knife people are sometimes. But anyway, I've always loved Ray's designs, and they basically all look fairly similar to this. This is definitely part of his design language, sort of like yeah, continuous curves and sort of small kind of oval handles, all that sort of good stuff. He definitely has a type, and I like that type. It goes well with me. Now, the Match Drop Keen was a knife that I owned very recently, and when I did my massive knife cull, was in reducing my everyday carry rotation to simply three knives, being the TRM Atom, the Spyderco Police 4, and the Spyderco Spidey Chef. It went, and it was probably one of the more difficult ones to sell, but it sold. Anyway, Sam, one of my viewers, long-time viewer and commenter, has sent me his USD Jasmine, which is made by a company called Alliance Designs, which is, get this, a Chinese design OEM that gets manufacturers from all over and makes production versions of their knives.
Groundbreaking.
Yes, it isn't quite the newest thing to be doing, but nevertheless they've made this one very nicely. It's a nice iteration of Ray's Jasmine design, which I would say was previously implemented as almost a direct emulation, perhaps you could say, with the Kaiser Gemini. This is probably a little bit more true to the custom version, perhaps a little less Kaisering. If you know Kaiser, you know their sort of swirly pivots, they're lighter coloured, rounder titanium, all that sort of stuff. This is a little bit more authentic to perhaps a Jasmine custom, which perhaps is what Alliance is going for. Anyway, I've used the knife for a fair bit. I've figured out what its strengths are and what its weaknesses are. So let's first of all take it down to a size comparison so you can get an idea of how big this relatively little knife is. Alrighty, so let's go into the elements of the blade. So let's look at first the blade. So the blade is an S35 VN steel. It is a hollow ground blade with a very sort of a very drop point. So the point is actually dropping below the pivot, or at least even slightly below the pivot line, which makes it for a sort of semi uneven look to it, which I actually don't quite mind. It still retains a very sharp tip, and it definitely has a lot of that hollow scalloping involved in the tip there, making it quite a good piercer. So there is that. It's a very, it's a quite a nice shape. I quite like it. It's got about half flat, half belly, good ratios. Everything about the shape of the blade is really good. The grind of the blade is the best part of the whole knife. It's an excellent grind. A hollow grind is really my favorite grind for everyday carry work. Maybe not for my harder use blades or my bigger, sillier knives, but for an everyday carry slicing knife, a hollow grind is really going to get you that extra mileage, especially from a steel like S35VN, which is nowhere near the top of the tower anymore in terms of edge retention, stain resistance, but is still a highly competent steel. So hollow grinding such a steel with a really nice hollow like this, really thin behind the edge, is going to keep it cutting really, really well, even when perhaps this edge is going just a little bit less than screamingly sharp. So I really am happy with the hollow grind on this one, and it's in fact my first Laconico with a hollow grind. I've had the Gemini, I've had the Keen. They're both pretty well done flats. Oh, my hammering neighbours, I'm so sorry. Fuck, I could not reduce the sound of those fucking hammer blows. Drive me crazy. It doesn't go on for too much longer. I'm sorry. This has definitely got about an extra sort of 50% bite in it, to use, you know, meaningless statistics. But anyway, it's a bit bitier and it cuts a whole lot better. So I've cut all sorts of things with it. I've done my food prep, my fruit prep for the kids' lunch boxes, all that good stuff. This really sang when I took it to my vinyl tubing test, which is some of the worst stuff to cut. You need a really sharp, keen edge to get started on it, and then you need good geometries after that to continue the cuts. And this, you could cut it really thin, you could cut it really evenly, cut really, really well. So an excellently ground blade. Quite a deep hollow grind, really doing the good stuff, keeping it nice and thin behind the edge, really letting the S35VN sing. S35VN, still a great steel. I would not knock a knife in this steel as long as you're not paying too much of it, too much for it, unless you're getting a lot of it. That came out, I think, the way I intended to. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the other part of the review. At any rate, the handle of the knife is ergonomically very simple. It's a smooth, round Laconico style handle, and the shape I have no issue with. What I do have an issue with is the corners. There are very little in the way of chamfers knocking the edges off these rather sharp corners here. So when you bear down on a knife, say when you're trying to let this hollow grind sing by doing some vinyl tubing cutting, your grip on this is going to be a little bit painful. It's got edges. It's funny because it's quite a round, low impact looking handle, but from this angle here, it's actually quite sharp. And with a titanium style material, not even a sort of softer material like a micarta or a G10 or even a wood, those corners are going to be a little bit more merciless on your hands. So I am not a big fan of the ergos on this blade just because of that. The grip is fine, like the way it fits into my hand. It could be a little bit of a bigger handle for me, like my pinky finger goes right down to the end of it, so that's just on okay for me, but I would still prefer a slightly larger knife. I'm just going to go ahead and say I'm like the Keen much, much more for my hand size, and ergonomically speaking, it is a little bit more chamfered, a little bit smoother in the hand, a little bit nicer, all up. So ergonomics, it's a little bit of a swing and a miss for me on this Laconico Jasmine USD from Alliance Designs. Now Sam's main issue with it, he says he got this and I don't think he's super keen on it. Well, he's not, doesn't hate it, but his thing is he doesn't love the pocket clip. And I get that, I can totally see stiff titanium, you know, one-piece pocket clips, as in like it's not a piece of sprung steel like say on this Spyderco Police here. These are designed to kind of force over the pocket rather than sort of wrap around that pocket seam, and that can be a bit trying, especially when it's relatively shallow carry and you've got, you know, a decent ramp but not an amazing ramp either to sort of get it over that maybe thicker pants pocket. So I get that. I'm not too bothered by it. I've had sort of plenty of knives like this and it doesn't switch me off straight away. It's just more of something I don't mind, neither here nor there on, but I can definitely see some folks like either a deeper carry or a spring clip carry or something like that. As it is, it goes very much along with the design, I suppose, and it's very much more like a clip you would find on a custom knife. And I think that's what they're really going for on this one. Like a custom, production custom, which is, again, not a new thing by any sense, but seems like they're really kind of going to try and emulate the whole feel of having a custom knife at a less than custom price. But only just. So this knife is $330 US from the Alliance Design website. That's a price to me that makes no sense. Alliance Design is a Chinese OEM, much akin to, say, We Knives or Kaiser even. And Kaiser will sell you a Gemini for less than $150 US. Mass Drop, the drop keen made by We Knives, is $150 US at the moment for a bigger knife in the same materials with better ergonomics. This is over twice the price of those two knives, and it's just not good enough. It's a bad price. It's too expensive, and I don't think that if this is what a Laconico Jasmine feels like, then it's not as good a knife as the Laconico Keen is anyway if you're after a Laconico knife. It's too many edges, it's a little bit on the small side, the grind is fantastic, the flipping action, everything about it is great, but these are things that all Chinese OEMs have figured out years ago. How to make good actions, how to get good grinds, how to get good performance out of S35 VN steel. None of this is new. What is new is that it's, I guess, a fairly faithful replication of a Jasmine Custom, but it's at a really unreasonable price in my opinion. I think $330 is far too much for what you're getting here. Materials-wise, there isn't anything special going on in terms of pivots, or even in terms of extra materials or machining complexity or anything like that. It is solely going on the people who've always wanted a Laconico Jasmine, but haven't been able to get on his books, or haven't been able to raise the the closer to $1,000 that may cost getting Ray to make you one, personally. So as far as this pattern goes, I'd still stick with the Kaiser Gemini myself, and as far as a good Laconico goes, the Mass Drop Keen is the best one on the market at the moment for a production blade. Ray's customs, I'm sure, are remarkable, but I have no benchmark there because I've never handled one. You won't find me buying custom knives. I just don't see that doesn't match up with me as a knife buyer. All I would suggest this knife is for is someone who has a large amount of disposable income, who particularly wants the Jasmine model, and it has to be like a relatively faithful replication of the Jasmine model. So a bit of a miss there, I'm sorry to say, Alliance Designs and Sam. Feels a bit sad ending the review on that note, doesn't it? Well, I guess what we could do is get out the giant book of porn, perhaps, and have a bit of a look, and maybe pick up everyone's spirits. Can't show that on YouTube. Can't show that on YouTube. Nope. Can't show that on YouTube. You know, people have been filthy for at least 150 years. Kind of makes me feel a little bit happier